The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to When Getting Along Together Doesn't Equal Results, what it really takes to build a high-performance team. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Nicole Bendaly, and I look forward to spending the next hour with you and providing you with some tools and strategies and helping you to build a greater understanding of what it really takes to build a high-performance team. So to want to get started with just providing you with a quick overview of what you're going to be walking away with today, and then I'll share a little bit about myself and my company so that you can get a sense of where this expertise is coming from and the research and testing behind it. So by the end of today's session, you'll walk away with a number of things. First of all, you'll have a strong understanding of 3 of the key success requirements for developing high-performance teams. So these 3 success requirements that I'll be reviewing with you today are those requirements that we have found through our research make the biggest difference in helping a team to perform at higher levels. So today, we're really focusing on those teams that get along well together but don't perform well together. And the 3 requirements that we'll be reviewing today are those that make the biggest difference in moving a team who gets along well but doesn't like to rock the boat so much, who gets along well but doesn't necessarily stretch themselves for higher levels and higher goals. These are the requirements that you need to implement in order to stretch your team to ensure that they are really reaching as high as they possibly can for your organization's goals and for your team's goals. By the end of today's session, you'll also walk away with an ability to really create greater accountability for the success of your team. You know, so many leaders wear the responsibility of success for the team and own it and feel as though it's just their responsibility. But those teams that perform at the highest of levels are teams that share that responsibility, are made up of team members who are equally committed and feel equal accountability for the success of the team. So when you apply these 3 success requirements consistently and focus on them, you'll see a real difference in team member engagement and accountability for results and performance. You'll also be gaining strategies to focus your teams on the factors that are most critical to their effectiveness, and you'll be getting some tools along the way to apply these 3 success requirements. So we're going to be sharing a lot of information with you over a short period of time, and I'm really excited that you all have access to these great tools. So thank you for joining me today. Now, before we get into the content of today's session, I want to introduce myself and my company to you. So like I said, my name is Nicole Bendaly. I am the president of Connect. And Connect, you know, we've been around for over 25 years now. And our sole goal is to help organizations to tap the best of their teams and leaders. And we work directly with organizations and directly with leaders of teams and the teams themselves for the sole purpose of providing easier ways to achieve better performance. You know, our goal is to help people to achieve better results with less struggle. And we do that through a number of online tools. We do that through team and leadership development workshops, customized and off-the-shelf team and leadership assessments. So you can learn more about us at our website that's on the page in front of you. And we work with organizations all around the world. And we also have had a number of books published. So I know a number of you online today work in a number of different industries, from retail to healthcare to banking, you know, a number of industries. And so we have tools that are specific to certain industries. A number of our tools focus specifically on healthcare team and leadership performance, and our other tools are specific to, you know, corporate or government and non-healthcare organizations as well. So our tools and models have been published in in over 10 books and used by organizations around the world. And all of the tools and models that we share and are sharing through today's session are based on the research that we do with teams and have been tested and retested over our 25 years of working with teams and leaders of all levels and across a number of industries. So you can be sure that when I share tools with you and strategies that we have found them to actually work and make a difference in a team and leader's performance. Okay. We are also the creators of the Team Fitness tool, and if you are looking for an easier way to strengthen your team and create a happier team and more engaged team, then this tool enables you to do that more easily and gives you everything you need to do that. And so if you want to learn more about it, again, you can go to our website. Okay, so that's a little bit about who I am, who my company is, and now it's time to actually get into the good stuff here and provide you with some a greater understanding and some real tools to elevate the performance of your team. So you'll need two things over the course of the next hour. One, you'll need a pen and paper. You know, I'll be sharing quite a bit of information in a short period of time. I will be sending the recording of the session out to all of you, so you'll have access to it, but please do take some notes. And also, you know, consider this hour as a gift to yourself. We as leaders don't often take time to really focus on, you know, some of the things that we need to start doing a little bit differently to achieve better results more easily. And so bring your focus to this session and treat it as an hour of just time for yourself. So shut down your emails, you know, shut down Outlook, turn off Twitter. Unless you're tweeting about me, you can go to @NicoleBendley. Feel free to tweet. No, you know, shut your door and really focus on the content that we're sharing today. Okay, so, you know, when we work with, we're going to get started into the content of the session now. In our team development practice that, you know, we've been supporting teams of all types for over 25 years now, and we generally work with 3 types of teams. And I'm sure you will be able to relate to one of these 3 types of teams. So the first type of team that we work with is a team who recognizes that they aren't performing well. It's a team that's experiencing conflict. It's a team that is experiencing perhaps a breakdown in communication, poor results. Maybe there's, you know, gossip and bullying even within the team, or a lack of trust, some disrespect happening, silos. Okay, this type of team recognizes that there's a need to improve and recognizes the need to come together and participate in some team development. That's the first type of team. That's the most common type of team that we work with. The second type of team is a team that is already performing well at an exceptional level. This is a team that gels well, they get along together, but they also challenge one another. They also push one another to achieve better results. They're innovative, they're flexible. And because they're performing at a high level, they also recognize the importance of focusing on team development. They recognize the importance of coming together for the purpose of looking for new and better ways of working together to achieve even better results. And this is the second type of team that we work with. Now, the third type of team, this is the team that we're focusing on today. This is a team that doesn't immediately recognize that there's room for improvement. This is a team that doesn't immediately recognize that there's work to be done and that there are aspects of the team that really isn't functioning well, because this is a team that on the surface gets along well. You know, this is a team where we'll hear comments like, well, it feels like home, we're like family, we really like each other, you know, we get along really well. But when we work with these types of teams that get along really well together and we start to ask some questions and scratch the surface a little bit, we start to hear comments like, yeah, you know, we get along really well together, but, you know, we don't really take feedback very well. Or we get along really well and I love working in this team, but we're not really innovative. We just do the same old, same old. We don't challenge one another. So while there's a level of trust within these types of teams, while there's a level of respect and a strong sense of camaraderie, there doesn't seem to be quite enough trust there in order to challenge one another, in order to be comfortable receiving feedback and giving feedback, in order to really be motivated and engaged to reach higher levels. And so today's session is about that third type of team, the team that gets along well together but doesn't perform well together. So when we look at the group development cycle, now some of you may be familiar with this, but I'm going to give you just a quick overview of what it is. Okay, this is the group development cycle that was developed by Bruce Tuckman in the 60s. And it's an oldie, but it's a goodie, and it applies to how teams perform and develop over time. So you'll see 4 phases of the development cycle, right? The first phase is this norming phase. This is when the team is formed at the beginning, or when a new team member joins. Okay, so when a team has been established maybe for 10 years and a new team member joins, you move back to the forming stage. Okay, in the forming stage, everybody gets along well. We're putting our best foot forward. We're, very polite, and true colors and true personalities and true behaviors aren't seen yet. Then the team moves into a storming phase. There's some struggle, some role, maybe lack of role clarity. There's some power struggles. There's conflict. And teams can move back into this stage at different points in time, into the storming phase. So that first team that I talked to you about are teams that are in the storming phase, right? There's conflict, there's breakdowns in the team that are impacting the team's effectiveness. Okay, there's a real recognition that work needs to be done. Then the third phase is this norming phase, and this is that third type of team that we're focusing on today. In the norming phase, complacency and mediocrity set in, right? We're not challenging the status quo. We're performing at an average level, but we're not really reaching new heights. We're not innovative. We're not managing change effectively, perhaps. We're just very comfortable. There's no rocking of the boat, and we want to maintain the status quo. That's the definition of a team that gets along well together but doesn't perform well together. And teams get stuck in the norming phase in part because they don't want to experience conflict and the storming phase. And also they perhaps don't recognize the need to move to higher levels of performance. And so the purpose of today's session is to give you those tools so that you can move your teams from the norming stage to the performing stage. Now, if you are leading a team that is in the storming phase, that's experiencing some conflict and a lack of trust and a lack of respect, then that's where you want to start, okay, because you need that foundation of trust and respect to move on, okay? In today's session, we're not focusing on building that trust and respect. However, when you apply these 3 requirements that we're focusing on, you will inevitably build or deepen the trust and respect that's already there. Okay? Okay, so the goal is to move from the norming phase to the performing stage and stay there. So how are we going to do that? We're going to do that by sharing 3 success requirements with you. Now, the first success requirement is locking onto success. Okay, and this is something that I focus on in a number of our webinars, the ability to ensure your team is focused on exactly what it is that you're trying to achieve. So I'd like you to all do me a favor. I'd like you to raise your hands. Now, I know I can't see you, but I'd like you to humor me, okay? So I'd like you to all please raise your hands. I'm going to assume you've raised them. Now, raise them higher for me. Now, raise them even higher. Now, reach as high as you possibly can. Now, why didn't you do that to begin with? Why didn't you reach as high as you possibly can the first time I asked you to? Or the first time I asked you to raise your hands, I should say. You didn't reach as high as you possibly can because I didn't specifically ask you to reach as high as you possibly can. I didn't motivate, encourage you, inspire you to reach as high as you possibly can. Okay, high-performance teams, high-performance leaders are fanatically focused on reaching as high as they possibly can at all times. And in order for your team to reach as high as they possibly can for your team's goals, for your organization's goals, and stay focused on reaching as high as they possibly can at all times, they first need to understand what it is they're reaching for. And they need to be consistently reminded and encouraged and motivated to reach for that goal. So I'm going to share a story with you, and it's one of my favorite examples. So if you've participated in my webinars before, you'll know it. And it's an example about Southwest Airlines, and I encourage you to share this story with your teams and use it in your own leadership practice. So it's a story about Southwest, and a number of you would be familiar with this airline. And it's been the study of a number of research projects on organizational culture, on success, on employee engagement, team performance, because this airline has been so successful and has such a strong culture. And this airline has managed to remain profitable in a struggling industry, in an industry faced with enormous costs and a recession and a number of other things. Southwest Airlines has not only managed to remain profitable, but have managed to keep their fees and costs to the passengers low, to the point where they don't even charge baggage fees until you have your third bag. And that's unheard of. I mean, I just flew an airline the other day, and I was charged for my very first bag. And so Southwest has managed to live up to their vision of providing the most outstanding service at the lowest cost. And they've maintained that vision and achieved that vision by being fanatically focused on it. And so to get a better understanding of what I mean by fanatically focused, I'm going to share a story about the airline's founder and previous CEO. So Urt Keller is the founder and previous CEO, and he's been credited with much of the success of the organization, mostly due to his leadership approach and his recognition that in order for Southwest to be a success, Southwest needs to be made up of highly engaged employees. Southwest needs to be made up of high-performance teams and highly engaged employees. And so he was fanatically focused about creating that engagement. And this is how he did it. There's actually a story about Keller teaching his protege how to lead the organization one day. And the story goes, he turns to his protege, Mark, and he says, "Mark, I can teach you how to lead this business as well as I can in 30 seconds. Here it is. Southwest Airlines provides the most outstanding service. We don't just provide outstanding service, we provide the most outstanding service. And we are the low-fare airline. We are not just a low-fare airline, we are the low-fare airline. And once you understand those two facts, you can make any decision about this organization as well as I can." And he goes on to share an example. He says, suppose Sarah from marketing comes into your office and says, "I think the passengers on the Houston to Vegas flight would like a nice light Caesar salad." "And what do you say to Sarah?" he asks Mark, and Keller answers himself. He says, you first acknowledge Sarah for bringing the idea to you. Because maybe it's a good idea, maybe it's not. The most important piece right now is to improve the customer experience and achieve our goal of providing the most outstanding service. So you want to recognize and make sure she is aware that you value that. Then you want to have a conversation with Sarah and engage her in a dialogue. And you ask Sarah, how will adding a light chicken Caesar salad to the Houston to Vegas flight allow us to provide the most outstanding service at the lowest cost? Because again, maybe it's a great idea, maybe it's not. But the priority now is to have a conversation with Sarah so she not only starts to think about and assess whether or not this is a great idea, but is also reminded of our vision and is also reminded of what our main focus is. Why are we here every day? Why do we come to work every day? We come to work every day so that we can provide our customers with the most outstanding service at the lowest cost. And so Keller made it his mission to engage his employees in conversations every day. And I don't just mean his senior executive team. I mean people from the ground crew to the C-suite. He would walk around the organization and have those conversations and simply ask questions like, you know, what do you think we need to do to provide better service? What do you think we need to do to reduce our costs and ensure that we remain the low-fare airline? And so he wasn't just the only one that was fanatically focused on success and achieving that success. He ensured that everybody in his organization was just as focused on that. And he created that focus by ensuring people knew that they were of value, that their ideas were important, that they all made a difference regardless of their role in the organization. They all played a vital role in achieving success. And he engaged people in conversations and reminded them of what the organization is about. Okay, that is one of the biggest requirements for success, is being focused on it and ensuring your team members not only know what the goal is, but are motivated and engaged and feel empowered to achieve it. So my question to you is, what is your organization's success statement? What is your organization's success statement? What is your organization working towards? How does your organization define success? And by organization, I don't mean your team, I mean the overall organization. So whether you're in a hospital, whether you own and run a retail store, whether you are in a bank, okay, what is the organization's vision of success? High-performance leaders know what success looks like for their organization without having to think about it. Because if you as leaders don't know what your organization is reaching for, you can be sure your team members don't know. And they therefore won't be motivated and engaged and fanatically focused on achieving it. Now my next question for you is, what is your team's success statement? Your team's success statement is going to be different than the overall organization's success statement because there are a number of teams that make up your organization. So, for example, a marketing team is going to have a different success statement than the IT group or the customer service team, right? Your retail sales associates on the floor are going to have a different success statement than the management team, for example. The neonatal intensive care unit is going to have a different success statement than the custodial team or custodial services within a hospital. But everybody is working towards the same overall goal. They just have different roles to play in achieving that goal. But if you don't know what your team's success statement is, and if you can't describe it clearly and succinctly, then you can be sure your team members don't know what it is. And when your team members don't know what it is, they're going to be, A, pulling in different directions and focused on activities and tasks that won't directly lead them to the goal. And B, if they don't know what they're working towards and why it's important and how it fits with the bigger picture, they will be less engaged and less motivated to achieve it. When we can be connected to a greater purpose, the why are we here? It's bigger than what we are doing. right? So, for example, the ground crew, right? They know, for example, that their job, their task, is to quickly move baggage, right, from one place to another. But the why are they doing that? They want to be able to provide the best experience possible and support people in having the best traveling experience, right? So it's that why piece. It's not just what you're doing, it's the overall purpose that connects people to it and feel motivated to actually achieving it and making a difference. So knowing exactly what your organization is working towards and having a clear success statement for your team, that will help lock your team onto success. Now my next question, I have a lot of questions for you today. My next question is, when was the last time you talked about your team's vision and your team's values with those you lead? And the answer you're looking for is today. This was another, success habit of Keller's, and it's a habit of every high-performance leader in that they ensure they're having conversations every day about the team's goals and about the values that the team members need to, own and be committed to in order to achieve that vision, in order to achieve that success. And so looking for opportunities to weave the team's vision and goals and values into your everyday conversation is essential. So want to wrap up this first success requirement by giving you some tips to ensure your team is locking on to success. Okay, so my first recommendation for you is to set aside a team meeting, and I recommend doing this sooner rather than later because you're going to forget all about this if you don't do this sooner than later. Bring your team together to A, develop a success statement if you don't have one, or B, share your success statement, okay, and have a conversation around it. So if you have a small team, I recommend developing a success statement with your team, because when your team can be involved in developing it, they'll feel a greater sense of ownership to it, okay? If you already have a success statement, then bring it to the team to have a conversation. And one of the questions that you can ask to generate a dialogue around the success statement is to ask your team members what they feel the team's top 3 priorities are for achieving success. And this is an important question for a couple of reasons. A, it gets your team focused on success and really thinking about, oh yeah, what do we really need to do to achieve this on a daily basis? B, it ensures that your team, is aware that there are priorities and that the team should be focusing on certain priorities in order to achieve success. And 3, it shows you, the leader, and the team whether everybody is aligned and focusing on the same priorities. Because if you find everybody has a different idea as to what the team should be focused on in order to achieve success, then you have a team that's not cohesive. You have a team made up of people who are pulling in different directions and wasting energy on tasks and activities that aren't essential to achieving success. Okay, so bring your team together to develop a success statement or have a dialogue about it, and identify and talk about your team's 3 priorities for achieving it. Now, as a leader, you may have a number of teams that report into you. So each team would have its own success requirements. Okay, as a department, you may have an overall success statement, but each team within your department may have their own success statement and their own sets of priorities. Okay? Include your team and organization's goals in everyday conversations. All right? If you do nothing from this session other than start talking about your goals and engaging people in conversations, and by conversations I don't mean you talking at them, I mean you asking questions and getting people's ideas and getting people to think about how they can contribute to the overall vision. If you only do that, you'll see a change in not only performance, but you'll see a change in engagement, in trust, in communication, it really has a big impact. You know, when we work with leaders and teams, there's this notion that in order to improve performance, we need to make really big changes. And at the end of the day, it's the small things, it's the little things that make the biggest difference. We don't need to, you know, implement these huge, you know, changes and huge initiatives to improve our team's performance. We just need to start doing a few things, a few little things differently, or start implementing a few little things, like developing a success statement. That's not a big thing. That's a small thing. Having conversations more regularly and asking questions of your team members is a small thing that makes a big difference. Okay? Ask more questions, like I said, right? Create dialogue. How will this help us achieve our goal? When somebody comes to you with an idea, I know we're all very busy people, and I do this too, and it's easy to, you know, shut down the conversation and say, that's great, leave it with me, I'll look into it, right? Instead of shutting it down, simply ask, well, tell me a little bit more about the idea. How do you think it'll help us reach our goal of X? Okay, so you're building some accountability there for people who are bringing ideas to you, right? They're thinking about how this idea will work. You're reminding them of the vision. Okay, asking questions is a powerful, powerful technique. Okay, so that was the first success requirement. So right now, I'd like you to write down at least one thing you will do to help your team lock on to success. Write it down right now. One thing you're going to do. Okay. Now, the next success requirement is feeding the right wolf. And to introduce the success statement, I'm actually, or success requirement, I should say, I'm actually going to read a story to you. And it's a Cherokee parable about an old man teaching his grandson about life. And it really illustrates how we can achieve, you know, higher levels of performance. So I'm just going to read the story to you right now. There are two wolves fighting ferociously inside me, he said to the boy. One wolf is evil. He is anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego, said the grandfather. Well, who is the other wolf, grandfather? Asked the boy. Oh, the other wolf is very different. He is good. He is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, and all other good things, answered the grandfather. Well, now the boy looked curious and asked, do I have wolves living inside me? Oh, yes, you and every living person, said the grandfather. Well, now the boy looked really worried. Which will win, grandfather, he asked. And the old man replied, the one you feed. Every team, every organization, every individual has wolves living within them. Not wolves of good and evil necessarily, but wolves of success and failure. And there's often a third wolf lurking within teams and organizations, and it's the wolf of complacency or the wolf of mediocrity. And we feed these wolves with the little crumbs we drop every day. And it's the little crumbs are the little things we do every day, the decisions, our behaviors, what we say to one another. Okay? The little things we do every day will either feed the wolf of success, the wolf of failure, or the wolf of mediocrity. And high-performance teams, high-performance leaders keep a very close eye on which wolf they're feeding and intentionally choose to feed the wolf of success and starve the wolves of failure and mediocrity. And they consciously choose the behaviors and practices that will enable them to achieve their success statement and feed that wolf of success. And the most dangerous wolf within organizations, and unfortunately often the biggest wolf, is that wolf of complacency, right? It's not the wolf of failure that's the most dangerous one. Because when we fail, we generally know we failed. And hopefully we take action to ensure that it doesn't happen again, right? Especially in healthcare, when we fail, we know it, and we want to make sure that it's not going to happen again and impact another patient, for example. So we'll take action to prevent that failure. But complacency sets in over time. I equate it to, a frog boiling in water, right? You drop a frog into a pot that's of boiling water, they'll feel that pain, right? Like failing, we'll feel that pain of failing. But when you slowly turn up the temperature, that frog doesn't feel it, right? And that's like a complacent team. Complacency sets in over time, and we don't even recognize that we are now average, and we are now hugging on to the status quo for fear of failure, for fear of rocking the boat and offending anybody, right? Those are two of the fears, or two of the reasons for complacency. There are a number of reasons, but the team that performs at its best is the team who intentionally decides and commits to feeding that wolf of success. And in order to feed the wolf of success, we first, need to know what success looks like. So you first need to lock onto that success, right, and have a clear success statement. And then the second piece is knowing those behaviors and practices that are essential for your team in order to achieve that success. Okay, so the behaviors and practices for a marketing team may look different than the behaviors and practices for an IT team, for example. And how we achieve that success may look different. So in order to feed the right wolf, in order to feed the wolf of success, there are a few things that you can do. Okay, first of all, I really urge you to share the wolf story. Okay, and have a conversation about those three wolves, the wolf of success, the wolf of failure, and the wolf of mediocrity. And you can get the wolf story from our website, okay, teamfitnesstool.com/wolf. And so share it at an upcoming team meeting. And then ask your team to identify the behaviors and practices that are currently showing up within your team that feed the wolf of success, that feed the wolf of mediocrity, and feed the wolf of failure. So have your team think about the day-to-day of the team, the day-to-day interactions, the behaviors they see, okay? And have them brainstorm and list those that are good, and you want to keep those you want them to keep happening because they're success, they're best practices, because they're feeding the wolf of success. And then ask them to also be, as honest as possible in identifying the behaviors that they feel are feeding the wolf of mediocrity. There's no finger pointing here and calling anybody out. It's just being very general that, when this happens, it can reflect complacency or mediocrity and prevent us from achieving success. And then have a conversation and ask your team to identify those behaviors and practices that the team needs to demonstrate more often, or that the team needs to stop doing. If you have a list of behaviors that feed the wolf of mediocrity, identify what needs to stop and what behavior needs to be replaced. What can we replace that behavior with? So if we're not providing one another with feedback, for example, that feeds the wolf of mediocrity. And in a team that gets along well together but doesn't perform well together, they tend not to provide feedback to one another. They tend not to challenge the status quo. They tend not to be proactive in sharing ideas. They tend not to look for new and better ways of doing things. These are all examples of behaviors and practices that feed the wolf of mediocrity. So if those are happening within your team, what are the opposing behaviors that will actually feed the wolf of success? Do we need to agree to be open to feedback? Do we need to agree to provide one another with feedback? Do we need to agree to share ideas and be open to them? Okay, so what needs to start happening within the team in order to prevent that mediocrity and build success? The goal is to move from the norming phase to that performing phase, and that will require people to stretch themselves. But in order for your team members to stretch themselves and step outside of their comfort zones, that requires that you clarify expectations, and not only clarify expectations, but set expectations and clarify that the bar is being raised here. And for us to achieve this success, that means that we need to start demonstrating these new behaviors and practices. And so I want to share a story with you around the importance of clarifying expectations. And it's actually a story about my family. And you know, my parents have been sharing this story that I'm going to share with you for, gosh, over 30 years now. And it's a story that gets shared at every single Christmas dinner at almost the exact same time. I mean, I know when the potatoes are about to be passed that I'm going to hear this story. And, you know, I hear this story every 30, you know, I've heard it every year for 35 years. And about 12 years ago, a light bulb went off, and I thought, I can use this story. There's a lesson here. So I'm going to share the story with you. And it's a story about my little brother. And when he was about 5 years old, and just sort of learning to write his name and read, we were sitting around the dining room table, and he piped up and he said, "I've written my letter to Santa and I've mailed it." And my parents were so proud that they had this son that was, you know, reading and writing at an early age, and they were also surprised because it was July and he was a little ahead of the game. And my brother is a stubborn soul, and he was stubborn when he was 5 years old, and would not tell my parents what he wanted from Santa. You know, like any good parent, you need to know what your child has asked Santa for. And so they continued to ask him over the course of the next, 5, 6 months. "What did you ask Santa for?" "Oh, I'm not telling you. Only Santa needs to know. And I'm going to get everything on my list because I'm going to be such a good boy." And that was his standard response. "You don't need to know. Only Santa needs to know." And so, sure enough, come Christmas morning, my brother runs downstairs and opens his first, you know, present from Santa, and it's Michelangelo, right? One of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles that he wanted. And luckily, that was on his list, so he was excited. But like any 5-year-old, that excitement lasted 0.3 seconds before he was on to his next present. Only he didn't turn to the present next to him. He ran out the front door. And so my parents chased after him and found him in the front yard pitching a complete fit because he was expecting to see, you know, Luke Skywalker's spaceship, I don't even know the name of it, from Star Wars, you know, parked out front. And that was his #1 gift from Santa that he wanted so badly. And he didn't get it, so he pitched a fit. And I realized 12 years ago when I heard this story again that we all walk around with our own letters to Santa. We all have our own sets of expectations that we just assume are going to be met. And when our expectations aren't met and we assume they will be, some of us pitch fits, right? Some of us pitch fits in an outward way, and that's when conflict occurs. And some of us pitch fits internally, right? We may not be as vocal about our disappointment, but we may react by disengaging from the team and not doing as much as we can or reaching as high as we possibly can to achieve the team's goals because our expectations aren't being met, and so we've disengaged. Now, sometimes our expectations are unrealistic, and that's okay, but if we assume they are but haven't had the opportunity to talk about them, we're going to assume that they are realistic, and we'll be frustrated if they're not met. So the point in clarifying the behaviors and practices that need to show up in the team is to ensure that everybody is on the same page. Everybody knows what's expected of them. And sometimes people oftentimes people are disengaged and are sort of pitching fits internally when they feel that other team members aren't pulling the load, when they feel that their leaders aren't, you know, doing enough to ensure that other people are reaching as high as they possibly can. And when they see that not everybody is pulling the load, then they'll start to disengage and they won't pull the load either. And then they look for other jobs and turnover increases. So clarifying expectations ensures everybody is on the same page and has the opportunity to clarify also what they need from their leaders in order to reach as high as they possibly can. Because some people may want feedback from you, may want some skill building, may want some coaching, okay, may have some expectations that they need of you, their leader, as well. Okay, so feeding the right wolf. One other way to do that is to huddle up, okay? So establish some weekly huddles. This can be really powerful if you start every Monday morning off, for example, with a 10-minute huddle, and you can simply ask the question, which wolf did we feed last week? If we fed the wolf of mediocrity, what do we need to do this week to feed the wolf of success? Or if we fed the wolf of success last week, let's celebrate that and recognize that. And what do we need to repeat again this week to be sure that we continue to feed it? Or what's one new thing we could do this week to feed the wolf of success? Okay, so again, it's having those conversations and making sure people are focused on pulling in the same direction, know the behaviors and practices that need to be present, and are consistently not only reminded of them, but are engaged in conversations about them and feel accountable and empowered to demonstrate them and hold other people accountable to them as well. Now, another tip that's essential is for you, the leader, to provide regular feedback. And I mean both positive and constructive. And so when you see those behaviors that feed the wolf of success being demonstrated, recognize them, acknowledge them. Right? Share team successes, share individual successes of team members, okay? And certainly when we see even little things that are happening that are feeding the wolf of mediocrity or certainly failure, you want to provide that constructive feedback in the moment, as close to when that event happens as possible. And it doesn't need to be a harsh conversation. It can simply be a conversation around, you know, I noticed that you did this behavior. And, you know, last month we talked about some of the behaviors that we need to stop demonstrating in order to feed the wolf of success. So can you recommit to doing this behavior or having a conversation with them about it? In any event, it's the key is to provide that feedback in the moment. Because if we as leaders don't provide regular feedback, people will just assume you either don't care or what they're doing is fine. So people need to be elevated to this higher standard, and you do that by providing that feedback and letting them know that this new standard is expected. Okay. Now, one more thing that I'm noticing isn't on these slides that I want to add is, and maybe is developing team agreements. So I'm going to come back to that in a minute if we have some time around developing a set of agreements to ensure your team member is actually focused on the right behaviors. So in the meantime, before we get to that piece, I'd like you to list at least one thing you're going to do, again, to lock your team onto success and to ensure that your team is feeding the right wolf. One more thing that you can do. Okay. So the last success requirement is staying focused on performance improvement. Okay, people make what is measured a priority. So this is really developing the ability to stay focused on those behaviors and practices and measure, the degree to which they're being implemented or being demonstrated. So here are some strategies. Here's where the team agreements are. So one of the strategies to keep your teams focused on performance improvement is developing and using team agreements. So I want to talk for a minute about the importance of staying focused on performance improvement. If you remember that graph that I showed you of the group development cycle, right? Forming, storming, norming, and performing. The teams that stay in the performing phase are focused on performance improvement. One of their priorities includes measuring their effectiveness and ensuring that they are consistently demonstrating the behaviors and practices essential to high-performance teams and essential to achieving their goals. And one of the ways they do that is that they develop and use team agreements. So team agreements define the behaviors and practices your team members have identified as essential to working more effectively together, to feeding the wolf of success. So in the last success requirement, one of the tips was to bring your team together and ask the question, what do we need to do to feed the wolf of success? And they will identify a list of behaviors and practices. Well, these can form your team agreements. The difference, though, is that team agreements are made up of behaviors and practices that are not sufficiently present in the team. Okay, so for example, if your team identifies the need to provide one another with feedback as a success requirement, but they already do that anyway, then it's not, you wouldn't want to include it in your team agreement. You only want to include behaviors and practices that, yes, are essential to feeding the wolf of success, but also are not being demonstrated yet or consistently within the team. Because team agreements, the power in team agreements, the purpose of them is to change behavior. And if your team agreements include behaviors that are already being demonstrated, they don't serve any purpose, okay? So include only those behaviors that are not sufficiently present in the team. And keep them to about 5 to 7 agreements, okay? Now, that's developing them. So you bring your team together, identify those behaviors and practices that need to show up more often, and put them into a set of agreements, no more than 5 to 7. You have your set of team agreements. Then the next step is to actually use them. Developing them once, putting them on a wall somewhere, and never using them isn't going to change any behavior. They're not going to work. They're not going to serve a purpose. So use them to conduct, informal check-ins. So every month or every 6 weeks, bring out the team agreements and have a conversation. How are we doing with these? How are we doing living up to these behaviors and practices that we as a team identified as being essential to working at higher levels, that we identified as essential to being an even better team? Have a conversation about them. Measure your team against them. Have your team measure themselves against them. It's a way to create a dialogue. It's a way to keep your team focused on those behaviors and practices. It's a way to measure team improvement. And it's a way for your team members to provide feedback to one another and take accountability. So they can now start saying, well, remember we agreed to do this. Okay, and use it as a means to really provide feedback, because it's your team members identifying these behaviors. You're not coming up with a set of behaviors and handing it to your team and saying, do these. It's your team identifying what they feel needs to happen within the team. So develop and use team agreements. And believe me, we've worked with hundreds of teams over the years, and those that consistently perform at a high level use team agreements. And after a few months, once you see a behavior on your agreements being demonstrated consistently, you can take it off. You can take it off the team agreement and recognize and celebrate that, this has become a habit, a positive habit now. So we can take this agreement off or this behavior off and add something new. What else do we need to start doing more effectively? Okay, so it's a living document. Okay. Now, the next strategy is assessing, okay? So assessing the behaviors and practices, measuring team performance is key. Now, your team agreements is a way to measure the behaviors and practices that your team members feel need to show up in order to achieve success. It's also important to measure team effectiveness and team performance. And you can do this any number of ways, well, in 2 ways specifically. You can have your team develop an informal assessment, and by informal I mean one that hasn't been tested for its reliability. It's one that's developed by your team for your team. And the importance, though, is what you want to measure is are the behaviors and practices that are essential to teamwork, that are essential to team performance. And so you're welcome to use the areas that we define as critical to team effectiveness as a guide to develop your own assessment. So if you were to go to our website, teamfitnesstool.com, you'll see a description of each of these 7 elements of a high-performance team that we have found through our research to make the biggest difference in a team's ability to perform at high levels. And you'll see a description of each of these. And you can bring this to your team and develop an assessment based on this. Develop a short survey to measure your teams against each of these elements. Okay, so this is something that you can do internally. You can also use a formal assessment externally to use once every 6 months. There are a number of team assessments out there. We offer one through our website if you want to use it. That measures teams against each of these 7 elements. We have one that's specific to healthcare and one for non-healthcare. Okay, again, you can access that at our website. So the key, though, is measuring, because you want to set benchmarks and know how well your team is doing. So not only setting benchmarks, but for you, the leader, to know, for example, of these 7 elements of a high-performance team, where is my team doing well, and where are there opportunities for improvement? Okay, so then you can focus your attention and your team's attention on developing those areas, and you'll be able to, see significant improvements in performance when you're focusing on the right areas, most important to a team's effectiveness. Okay. Now, so assessing. So 1, develop team agreements. 2, either develop or use an existing team assessment. And 3, this strategy can be really effective in keeping people focused on performance improvement. Developing a champion team. So by champion team, I mean, a small group of people within your team who are committed to ensuring team effectiveness and how we work together is kept a priority. Okay, and so this team is responsible for, developing or leading the development of the team agreements, for example, or responsible for bringing the team agreements to the meetings and having conversations about them. The champion team would be responsible for adding items to your team meeting agenda that's focused specifically on team development and identifying new and better ways of working together. So they are responsible for really keeping the team focused on teamwork and team performance. And, if you were also to go to our teamfitnesstool.com site, in the blog section, you'll find a number of exercises that your champion team or you as the leader can use at your team meetings. So keeping your team focused on performance improvement means setting aside dedicated time for your team to focus on performance improvement. So setting aside, 10 minutes at the end of every meeting that focuses on what do we need to do to be even better, or what worked last week. Okay, what do we need to do differently this week? Okay, setting time aside for it. And your champion team can run with that. Okay. So these are the 7 elements of a high-performance team that we've found through our research make the biggest difference in a team's ability to perform at their best. So if you want to learn about what each of these is about, you can visit our website. And if you want to use the assessment, you can contact me or visit the website as well. Okay? So again, one thing that you're going to do to lock on to success, to focus on feeding the right wolf, and to ensure your team is focused on performance improvement. What's one thing that you can do? Okay. So to recap, to lead your teams to higher levels of performance, you need to A, lock on to success, have a clear vision of what success looks like. You need to feed the right wolf and ensure your team members know the specific behaviors and practices essential to feeding the wolf of success. And finally, you need to stay focused on performance improvement. right? Ensure team members are demonstrating the behaviors and practices that feed the wolf of success. All right, so thank you so much for joining us. And if you are looking for an easier and more effective way to lead your teams to higher levels of performance and create even happier teams, you can take a look at our Team Fitness tool. Okay, it's an online tool that gives you everything you need to achieve, higher levels of team performance. And if you book a demo before March 15th, you'll receive 20% off. So you can check our website for that. Okay, thank you so very much. And I wish you all the very best in developing your teams and leading them to higher levels of performance. Have a wonderful day. Take care.